Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm Mariam. I work in the product marketing team here, and with me I have Aditya. He's leading our product marketing team, and there's Sandeep. He's the product manager and also the brainchild behind audiences. Um, so recently we launched the entire audiences suite, and honestly, it's been one of our most powerful features yet. We've been talking to a lot of customers trying to understand their use cases and how they've been using it. And we've kind of collected all of that, and we want to share it with you today to show you what all you can do with audiences and the kind of GTM use cases that it unlocks with it, right? So we'll keep this very simple if we can move to the agenda. Feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you have any questions, or you can simply add in your questions in the chat box. And after the webinar, in case you have any questions or if you need a hand with the use cases, you can feel free to reach out to any of us on Slack or email. Right. Now, coming to the agenda, we'll keep this short and crisp. I'll start with a quick intro on all the three types of audiences, and then we can get into the practical GTM use cases that you can use in sales and marketing. And we'll finally end with a live demo of on how do you actually build out these audiences on Rio, right? So moving on to why we really build audiences. I mean, honestly, on a light note, it's not just another feature for us. Everything we built in Rio, right? It starts from that one single truth that Dev GTM is very different. Like every SaaS GTM motion out there, right? Whether it's defining your ICP, the channels you use, the messaging you take to market, and even what intent looks like, right? It's very, very different for developer focused companies. And of course, you would know that. And figuring out who to target is no exception to this, right? For dev tools, the tech stack data is very critical. Like that tech stack of a company, it actually tells you whether there is an actual need for your product or if there's an actual fit for your product or not, right? So if a company is using a Pulumi or a HashiCorp or a GraphQL, so you already know a lot about their pain points and their readiness for your product versus any other firmographic filter like a funding stage or a employee range or like a industry could tell you, right? And this is not something that you're probably hearing for the first time, right? Which kind of brings me to my third point, which is the reality of how these account lists are actually built out and why it's not the most reliable way. Any existing tools that you see out there, right, whether that's an Apollo or a Zoom Info, these are all great tools, don't get me wrong. But for an industry that is as niche as DevTools, you need a very precise targeting approach, to put it that way, right? And in this approach, the tech stack filter is very, very critical. But the thing with the existing tools is that they don't have the volume or coverage for it. And which is why most of the teams, if you see, they would end up relying on either firmographics or some proxies because this data isn't there, right? And all of this kind of led us to build out the audiences feature, which helps you find accounts beyond your inbound discovery. There are three types of audiences that we've essentially built out. That's the company audience, the developer audience, and the buyer audience. Now, company audience basically helps you find accounts based on the very specific technographics data and hiring intent signal. We cover over 34,000 plus DevTool technologies, which you can leverage to build out your target account list. Next is the developer audience, which gives you the ability to find developers based on their specific skill sets. Now, this is a very unique tool because this developer audience feature comes from the fact that finding developers just based on their job titles or designation doesn't really give you enough context on the actual developer skills, right? So at Rio, we cover more than 40,000 developer skills across multiple sources like GitHub, Stack Overflow, LinkedIn. And you can find developers from either an existing account list or a company audience based on their specific skill sets. And finally, there's the buyer audience where you can find the relevant decision makers from either an existing account segment that you have on Rio or from that company audience or even from a target account list that you have, right? And now coming to one of the very main points on what makes the data really unique in Rio, right? Um, Volume and coverage are the two major things here. The lack of niche data on dev tools is essentially why we built out this feature. In fact, we did this entire head on comparison of data with Apollo and Zoom Info. And here's exactly what you see here in front of you is what we found, right? If you see, like for the broader technologies, right, most of these tools would cover it, but the volume of the coverage is much lesser. And the more niche you go, right, if you look at Pulumi or a Langgraph or Kubeflow, you will not find this data anywhere on Apollo or Zoom Info, right? Which brings us to the point that the more niche you go with DevTools, right, which is essentially how you should be targeting your accounts, right? These data is not available on Apollo or Zoom Info. And now that you have this data, right, the next question is how do you leverage this? Like after having multiple conversations with a couple of our customers, we've been able to figure out what's working and what's not working. And I think that's what Aditya will be walking you through. So over to you, Aditya.
Thanks, Mariam. Hi, everyone. This is Aditya. I lead product marketing, and I've kind of been in the same seat as you guys with having led a dev tool before. And yes, when Sandeep built this out, I was really feeling nostalgic on I wish I had this data and not having to rely on like e-commerce companies in North America, right? Which give me like a huge list of 20,000 companies, but I have no idea if they actually fit my use case. And yeah, so that's before I get into actually how to use the um, actually make use of audiences. That's a couple of things which I wanted to land was uh, obviously you do use Reo.Dev for looking at intent signals for inbound accounts who are actively showing some interest. But this gives all of us in DevTools an opportunity to build out lists of people and companies to expand that reach and go pure cold, right? And look at companies who are not talking to us, not evaluating the product, and get some advertising, get some outreach in front of them, and then come back and look at the intent signals. And what I've always felt is that your ICP is your ICP, and we are pretty good at defining that ICP that a company needs to be building out for this use case, using these other tools, have a minimum scale. The dev team needs to have this kind of a makeup. This is the skills that they have. We're able to define all this. But when we go into building the audiences, we tend to then use what's readily available, which is like industry and size of company and revenue. And then you're back at the square one saying, do these companies really fit? Right? Where this is where audiences really comes in. It's a way to get your message and your brand in front of more companies who should know about you and eventually get them to come and evaluate you when they have a use case, right? So the spectrum of use cases and the way to use audiences, like there's so many. But I'll just cover a few integrated use cases that kind of flow together and work together across all three audiences. So it's a pretty simple workflow, what we've seen some of the people we work with using, and we've kind of tied all this together, right? Uh, First is obviously build out your audience, build out your company audience, your developer audience, and your buyer audiences uh, on Reo.Dev. Uh, for especially for company and developer, you can straight away probably start running campaigns on LinkedIn and email uh, with the business emails and the LinkedIn IDs that you have. I'll get into it in a moment on how to pretty much build out what audiences to build out, what kind of logic to apply to that, and how to kind of structure out your LinkedIn campaigns as well. Uh, Having done that, so you run some ads and you've got like a few thousand ad impressions going across multiple accounts and people. Uh, Traditional, if you look at how ABM has traditionally worked or how ad management has worked, is we've typically said like, okay, let's run a few once a certain account hits like a threshold number of ad impressions, or we've got website visits, or they've downloaded an ebook or something like that. Let's progress them forward into new ads and then finally to being a qualified and marketing lead and then pass it on to SDRs to bring them in as a meeting. But we all know this. Developers don't download ebooks, right? They don't come to the website. They go to the docs, but they don't come to the website. If they come to the website, they they have all their cookies blocked. So using the traditional SaaS logic on how to measure effectiveness of campaigns kind of breaks apart unless you follow it up with intent signals. which is where the logic is build the audience, run your ads, come back to Rio. For those same audiences, look at the segment, which is the companies or people within that audience who are active on your product. Look at the activity levels, look at the intent signals, understand what's changed. So maybe a company, I will take Bank of America, for example, has no intent signals at all. You started campaigns with them based on because they qualified as part of your audience. 2 months later, you look at the segment and you see, oh, okay, now Bank of America is showing me high activity levels and have 4 developers evaluating my product. So you track that, and then you can realize that okay, different accounts have progressed. Some are still cold, like nothing has changed for them, so you can continue running ads, and you have a good logic now on why to run ads. Some of them are warmed up. They're probably not ready from a sales perspective. Like you don't want your sales team to be talking to them yet. They've just like maybe touched, done a little bit of looking around and left. Uh, but you can start retargeting there. You can start more email nurture there. You can even probably change up your ad campaigns as well to get something more involved and get more into things like ROI and use cases and case studies. And then those which are really hot, send them on to sales and let that outreach begin. Right. So that's the entire flow. It's audiences, advertising, mass outreach, track the intent signals so you can see the impact for real and not guess at it, and then kind of progress accounts down a funnel from cold to warm to hot, right? And building audiences, right? This kind of hits home for me quite often is if you look at an ML ops tool, the old way you'd have probably done it is like take a employee count band from 200 to 5,000 and a revenue band of say 10 million to $1 billion. And the old way to gun is like retail, computer software. Ideally, I'd want to do SaaS and e-commerce, but surprisingly, I couldn't find e-commerce and SaaS on Apollo or Zoom Info. So I had to kind of default back even more big to retail and computer software. But putting in all this, I come up with a count of like 50 to 100 companies. Uh, it's a good number, not a bad one. But is there a need for the product? How big are these companies? Where are they in their technological evolution? What tools are they using? Is there a need for an MLOps tool? I don't know, right? There's a lot of hopium involved in when we do the outreach and the advertising, and like hope you right land with the right person at the right time using the right tech stack. Whereas if we do it the new way, which is keep the same employee band, keep the same revenue band, but instead of going retail and computer software, we build it on TensorFlow and PyTorch. And right, very core technologies in the space. Any company using that, they're building something around the space for an MLOps tool, and we're getting a count of 2,700 companies. Smaller, but it's much more targeted, it's much more specific. And what really excites me about this is that because like some say 1,500 of these companies are using TensorFlow, you can tailor your messaging and tailor your advertising around that point. And similarly for PyTorch companies, right? And then if you layer on things like intent, say hiring intent, uh, geography, you get even more specific, right? And then you can go like, okay, TensorFlow companies, 200 to 5K employees, 10 million to $1 billion in North America, uh, in hiring for MLOps engineers, for these skills, hiring for PyTorch skills. Let me craft messaging in my advertising and uh, sales outreach based on that. And that for me was pretty exciting to do. Would have been pretty exciting to do. Right. Going into the LinkedIn bit itself, right? What I would suggest is build your audiences, maybe a couple of audiences on complementary tech, a couple of audiences on competitor, if like rip and replace is a viable thing in your space. If the uh, switching costs are very high or very unfeasible, then that is not viable. But complementary technologies are always viable for everyone. What do I mean by complementary technologies is like adjacent tools which are very close to your tool, like X plus Y is a very necessary combination. So those are like, so if a company is using PyTorch, then it automatically qualifies or makes sense for them to use uh, another tool adjacent to that, right? A good way to identify complementary tech is look at your existing customers, look at their tech stack, and say, okay, what else are they using alongside my tool? And realize, okay, they're using this with that, then makes sense. Then I should look for companies which are using these other tools. So you have end result, you'll have anywhere between like 2 and 5 audiences which stack up. Uh, Bring them into LinkedIn, probably a campaign group per audience. you may want to break it out on different messaging because you want different use cases or you're targeting different personas. Put all of these in a different campaign and get your ads going. Stick to brand awareness to begin with, right? Because that gives you probably the most flexibility in terms of ad formats. Uh, and one thing I've seen work for me personally is get as many ads as you can out there, right? Like 10, 20, 50, even 100 ads. And you'll be able to optimize pretty quickly on CTR as well, on which ads are really working, and then you can kind of delete the others. Optimize your landing pages. That's been definitely something we all miss. Really get those ad landing pages dev friendly, dev language friendly, and really tightly tied to what you're saying in the ads, because the ad is talking about a very specific use case. You don't want a very generic landing page because that just breaks the uh, cognitive continuum that you're working on, right? Having done that, then come back, build a segment, and Mariam will get into this right after this on how to track uh, the impact of your advertising back in Reo.Dev. And like I said, hot accounts, probably send them to sales, and warm accounts, start some remarketing, right? One more thing I'd like to highlight is we built out this ad library of DevTool, only DevTool ads, uh, probably something like 300 or 400 examples. It's live on our website. The URL is here. I'll drop it into the chat here as well. So it's a great place for inspiration, examples, ideas on what works and what doesn't work, right? And yeah, so having run all these ads, having tracked your ads, coming back into Rio, looking at the intent signal, seeing that, okay, some accounts have responded, some accounts are doing well. What do we do next? For sales teams, what they can do is if you have a company audience, uh, the high intent accounts, uh, find the buyers, build out a buyer audience for those high intent accounts on that segment, and enroll them in mass outreach sequences. And here, this is effective because these are accounts who are showing high intent. You're not doing blind cold stuff. These are companies who actually are actively evaluating a product, and you're getting in front of the decision makers and those with budgetary authority at the right time. You're not just like, hey, do you want to buy out of the blue? And another way is if it's a very assigned account segment and your reps are going like one account at a time in a prospecting mode, you can build out a buyer audience for the entire account segment. So then as they do their prospecting, the buyers are readily available already. They don't have to think on, should I add the buyers? Do I? It's there. And then they can just quickly add them into outbound sequences on Apollo or Lemlist or whatever is your outbound tool of choice. Yep. So that's kind of how it wraps together. And it all really comes together when the sales and marketing teams work together, right? And you have that neat handoff with intent signal tracking in the middle. But that said, all these use cases work independently. We have some of our customers who just build out buyer audiences and uh, do mass outreach, and that's that. We have other customers who are just running ads and they're not doing cold outreach. They're like, we'll run ads and let them hand raise and book a demo. We'll wait for that. It's fine. But so this is like the entire maybe ideal Mount Everest flow, but there's many pieces that you can pull out and modularly implement as well, right? Uh, Before we get into the demo, I think there's a hand raise or a question in chat. Oh, okay. You just put the ad examples in. Cool. Then with that, Mariam, back to you. We can get into the demo. Should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah. I'll just share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it. Yeah. Is it visible? Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, visible.
Yes. Cool. Okay. So I'll just quickly jump into the demo. We'll keep this quick and short. For audiences, you can basically find it under tools here in that left navigation panel. I'll start with the company audience. And in fact, I'll take the same example that Aditya just mentioned, right? If let's assume we're a MLOps platform, and now I want to find companies that are using TensorFlow and PyTorch. I'll click on create audience. You can specify the technology. That's TensorFlow and then PyTorch right here. In fact, I'll also use the same filters. There was 2,000, 205,000 employees, and right. you can also add in the hiring intent signals, right? You can specify the seniority, you can specify the job title that would be like your machine learning engineer or a lead machine learning engineer. And we'll click on preview. There's a lot of data that's being processed, so it just takes like a few seconds for it to load. Yep. So here you'll be able to see a preview of these companies. There are approximately 2.7K companies that we fetch for these particular technologies. And in fact, with the hiring, right, if you are looking at a little recent hiring, you can choose to see companies that have posted job openings in the last 30 days or 90 days. So this kind of validates that this tech stack is actively in use and they're kind of expanding the usage of their entire tech, right? And under this preview, you'll also be able to see these exact job postings that have been mentioned, right? Like you can see the match phrases here, you can see the entire description. And once you've done this preview, you can click on continue to save. Uh, you can name your audience. You can select the number of companies you want to save. So this is 2,700, which is the total number of companies you can choose to save, like 2,000 or how many other companies you want. I will not go ahead and create this audience because it takes some time. So for this demo, I have already created an audience. So I'll just quickly show this to you. It was the exact same filters, right? And this is the company audience list, right? Now with this company audience list, I can directly download a CSV from here, and then you can plug this CSV into your LinkedIn ads or upload it to any other tool where you want to run your outreach sequence like Aditya mentioned, right? And you can also send this directly to your CRM. And from the company audience, you can also now find developers and buyers within this companies, right? So if I just click on find developers here, I can again do the same thing, like mention those specific technologies I want the developers to be skilled at. Because again, getting back to the point that
Hey,
job.
Mariam, sorry, slow down a bit. It's the screen's lagging a bit. So
Oh, okay, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so I think I can start from the start.
I
Once
think you
we've
just start
created
from
the
the previous screen when you created the audience. I think the showing the download and all didn't. Uh, it was
okay.
lagging a little behind your voice.
Oh, okay, no worries. So basically, if you see here, using these same criterias, I already created audience before the demo because it takes a couple of hours. So we fetched like around 100 companies just as a sample. You can then simply download the CSV here, right? Once I do that, this is what I get. So these are all the fields that I'm able to extract, right? The LinkedIn company page, the match technologies, the location, revenue, industry, employee count range, everything. And you can also send this audience directly to your CRM. So if there is any workflows that are connected in your CRM, you can simply use this audience there as well. Right now, from this company audience, you can also find the developers and buyers within them, right? Which means you're basically creating your developer audience and buyer audience from this specific company audience. For instance, for developers, we'll just click on find developers. Here we'll use the same filters, like I would do a TensorFlow and the PyTorch, because again, coming back to what Aditya highlighted, right? Designation and job title tells me only so much, right? So we'll find developers that are specifically skilled at TensorFlow and PyTorch, right? There's an option of adding job title if that's what you want to add. So you can do that, and there's an option of adding the countries as well. You will see the source is automatically in the company audience. So basically, we're finding all the developers from these companies itself, right? Again, here you are able to see a preview. You will get their contact IDs like the email and the LinkedIn, and you'll also be able to see the skill source. Like for example, in this one, you can see the LinkedIn, the GitHub, the Twitter handle, right? And there's a Stack Overflow handle as well. So you can get all of this data. Um, We'll do a quick preview. So here you'll find like a limited a preview of all these developers within these company audience, and we can click on continue to save. Again, we'll the same process, right? Create the audience name, choose the number of developers you want to save. You can choose to either do extract just the LinkedIn ID or the LinkedIn and business email ID both. And we click on save audience. I will not go ahead and save the audience because I've already done that. Here, that's it. So you can view all your developers here. Just a second, this is loading. Yep. So you can view all the developers fetched for that particular company audience. And going back to the screen, you can again similarly like download the CSV and like plug this into any of your existing campaigns, and you can send them directly to your CRM. Or there's an option of also creating a campaign directly from Rio. So if you have a sequence on a polo, sales loft, or outreach, you can simply click here on create campaign, and that would take you back to that campaigns dashboard, and you can simply enroll this entire audience into an existing email sequence that you already have, right? um, Going back to audiences now, this was developers. Similarly, we can also find buyers within this company audience, right? So we click on find buyers. The source is automatically the audience, and you can specify your buyer persona, and we can simply create the buyer audience here, right? It's a flow similar to how you create a developer audience, right? And the buyer persona is a critical bit here because you want to find buyers only with specific designations or locations or job titles, right? So defining that persona is critical so that you are able to find buyers that match that exact persona, right? And once you create your buyer audience, you'll be able to put that on auto refresh, which essentially means that any new buyers that are found with the same ICP criteria that you've mentioned, they automatically get added to that list. And you can like download the CSV, and you can similarly send it to your CRM, create a campaign around it, view all your buyers here. And in fact, all these buyers that you add here, right? So if these accounts are in a segment, right, you will be able to view all those buyers from this company, from this audience in that particular account as well, right? So that kind of puts the entire manual prospecting on automation mode, right? Now, once you've created this company audience, if we get into a slightly more advanced place where you also talk about like, tracking the intent signals, the way to do that is create a segment. We'll just head to the segment section here. Sorry, this is just loading up. Under create segment, we can start off with a basic segment. In this example, I'll choose a account segment. And under the filters, you can basically choose the source as audiences. So you can create a segment of a company or a developer audience. So any account from this audience that starts showing activity, right? If they start engaging with your product assets, they will surface in the segment, which you can then view in your accounts dashboard. And then, of course, there are multiple plays which Aditya talked about, right? You can run those plays on your segments. So, yeah, that was about audiences. Is there any specific part you would like me to cover again? Any specific questions around this? Like all in all, so company, developer, buyer audience, like the ideal way to use it is, you start off with creating a company audience, then you find the developers and buyers within those. But having said that, these are all independent of each other, right? If I have a target account list, right, maybe like let's just assume I um, I'm hosting an event and I just want to call a few relevant developers to those, right? So I can simply go ahead, create that developer audience, send out that mass email outreach and invite them to that event, right? For buyers again, right? If I already have a hot account segment or certain high intent accounts, I can simply just go and fetch those buyers from there and start my mass outreach, right? So you can use all these audiences together. You can choose to use it independently. That completely depends upon your GTM motion. But for every use case, there's a way to kind of plug in audiences into it, right? Yep, I think that was on the demo. Is there anything else that anyone would like me to cover here?
I'll just add one closing thought for everyone here is that I wanted to highlight what Mariam was showing about the skill source for developers. So we reference multiple sources: LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, GitHub, Twitter, whole bunch of them. We collate all this and we cross verify skills across this, which is something that no other tool is invested in at this point. Uh, at most, probably they may just look at LinkedIn because they know how to get data from LinkedIn. But they're the only ones who kind of collate and cross verify skills across this. So it's probably, and considering also the scale of our developer database is upwards of 30 million now, it's probably the most high trust data and the largest high trust database of developers right now in the market.